Good morning, dear student. Today our topic is Indian banking system. As we know that the world economy is divided into many types of economic system, whether it is capitalistic, socialistic, mixed economy, communistic. So the economy which are partially or fully dependent on the banking system somehow, according to the economic expert, these economies are more effective and more potential for the business purposes. Today, I'm going to explain the organizational structure or operational structure of Indian banking system. This organizational structure or operational structure is different from the organizational structure of Reserve Bank of India. We have to know that there's a difference between organizational structure of Reserve Bank of India and Indian banking system. Although Reserve Bank of India is the one of the regulatory body of Indian banking system, RBI is monitoring the entire monetary policy, banking systems with the help of the with the consent of the Government of India, Ministry of Finance. Now, how the Indian banking systems came into existence, what are the different channels, what are the different process and phases of the Indian banking system. Let me explain step by step. There are four phases of Indian banking system. The first phase was divided and it was called as the evolutionary phase prior 1950. What was the that changes taken and what were the decisions taken by the that times of that time of governance and the government, because RBI was passed as an act and it was called as the RBI Act 1935. The RBI name came into existence in 1935 after the drafting of the laws, rules and regulations in 1934. The RBI came into existence in 1935. Then, then the second thing which was came into existence prior 1950 in the evolutionary phase, that was Banking Regulation Act 1949. Then we are moving to the second phase of the Indian banking system after 1950 to 1970. That is called as the foundation phase. Now I'm going to explain with the help of this chart how the scheduled banks, scheduled commercial banks and non-scheduled banks are working. Why the word commercial bank is written here? Is it different from public sector bank, private bank, foreign bank, regional rural banks? No. All these banks are collectively called as the commercial banks. Schedule, why the name scheduled banks is given here? The scheduled bank means the bank which are registered in the second schedule of RBI Act 1935. There are some rules which are followed by the all the banks according to RBI and banking companies following the Banking Regulation Act 1949. So let me explain step by step with the phases of Indian banking systems. In the foundation phase, in 1955, the SBI Previously, it was Imperial Bank of India, but during the foundation phase, the government of India passed one resolution and the SBI Act, effective from 1955, and therefore SBI was at that time called as the helping hand of Reserve Bank of India. In the same year, one of the private financial institution is also passed by the Indian government and license given by the Reserve Bank of India. That was ICICI 1955. It was the first private financial institutions which was approving the loans for the business point of view. Industrial Credit and Investment Corporation of India. Then in 1959, there was some banks which was merged with State Bank of India, and those banks were working as a associate or subsidiaries bank. These banks names are State Bank of Patiala, State Bank of Mysore, State Bank of Hyderabad, State Bank of Travancore. There are 6 banks which were associated with SBI as a subsidiaries bank. Then we are moving to the next one. In the second phase, July 1969, 14 banks were nationalized in the tenure of Indira Gandhi. And these 14 banks was nationalized just because of to strengthen the Indian banking system. And after that, in 1975, 1st April, in 1975, RRBs, regional rural banks, came into existence just because of it was the demand of the money market that there was not a single bank which was working for the rural sector, for the microfinance. So the objectives was regional rural banks to support the artisans, cottage industry, farmers, agriculture. So what is the structure of regional rural bank? 50% share owned by the government of India, 35% is sponsored by bank, and 50% is stake of state government. All the regional rural banks are sponsored by some national bank. After that, in the phase 3, this phase, in 1980, 6 more banks were nationalized, and this phase is called as the consolidation phase. In 1991, when the industrial policy changed and LPG era started, liberalization, privatization, and globalization, at that time, in the tenure of Narasimha Rao, at that time he was the Prime Minister of India, he set up one committee That committee is known as Narsimham Committee. It was the demand of the global economy and Indian economy. Many times the question was raised by the different experts that why we are not going to give the chance to the private sector. Then Narsimham Committee given the report that we should give or we must give the chance to the private sector, and it will increase the competition, quality, supply, all these things in Indian economy in all the sectors of the industry. So in 1991, it was the remarkable change in the Indian economy. It is also called as the third phase, a reformatory phase of Indian banking system, where the different banks came into existence. Let me explain with the help of this diagram what is the public sector bank. Public sector banks are those banks which are nationalized in 1968-69, and these banks is also called as the a government of India undertaking. Now, after the industrial policy 1991, when the chances given to the private sectors, the RBI issued the license, some of the leading company of India to invest in the banking sector. The first bank which was approved and got the license for the banking sector, it was ICICI in 1997 and 98. So that ICICI financial institutions now invested in banking sector. Then the FDI liberalization era was started. Then some foreign banks are also invested in India. They were expanded the branches and set up new branches in India. This bank is called as the foreign banks, and RRBs you know very well. Then the second part is cooperative banks. Cooperative banks are those banks which starts with the cooperative societies. The society which are registered under the Societies Act 1816 and applied for the license from the RBI to invest to start the banking in India. These types of banks is called as the cooperative banks. And cooperative banks is also commercial bank. All the commercial banks are dealing with the public with the different accounts. There are savings, current, recurring, and fixed deposit with the different rates. And there are different types of bank rate. But there's a three levels of cooperative banks. One cooperative bank is working in the rural area, then state, then district wise, after that state wise. These are three category of cooperative bank. Now public sector banks, private sector banks, foreign banks, and regional rural banks. All these banks are called as the commercial banks. Commercial bank is not different from the all these banks. Collectively, these banks are called as the commercial banks. Now, the current governor of RBI is Shashikanta Das. He is the 25th governor of RBI. Now, with the help of the diagram, we understand that what is the organizational structure of Indian banking system. Now, the second types of banks are development bank. These banks are not open for the general public. There are no such a types of bank account like saving bank, current bank, recurring deposit, fixed deposit. No. These banks are drafted, structured for the industrial development, for the different industrial development, structural development, infrastructure development. So these development banks is divided to four parts. One is called as the Industrial Development Bank. Industrial development is basically approving the project for the industrial sectors, and these banks are IFCI, Industrial Finance Corporation of India, IDBI, which was first passed in 1964 with the objectives of to strengthen the industry. So IDBI full form is Industrial Development Bank of India. Then next one is SIDBI, Small Industrial Development Bank of India. It came into existence on 2nd April 1990, before the Industrial Policy 1991. Then next one is Agricultural Development Bank. Agricultural Development Bank is looking after by the NABARD. You know that nowadays in the rural area, the Manrega project is going on. In Manrega project, a different government project is maintained by the Manrega scheme, and NABARD is the bank which are financing and doing the payment for these types of scheme. So Agricultural Development Bank, the agricultural sectors is sponsored and looking after by the NABARD, National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development. NABARD is also, the RBI is given the full right to the NABARD to monitor the regional rural bank. NABARD was established in 12 July 1982. The next thing is Export-Import Banks. Export-Import Banks is that types of banks which are dealing in export and import and to improve the balance of payment and trade globally. The next one is Housing Development Bank. National Housing Board, there are some state finance company which is financing the different types of schemes of the government for the housing development. Now I'm moving to the next one, Export Import Bank. These all the development banks, as I told you that these are not open for the general public. Export Import Bank of India is premier export finance institution in India, established in March 1982 under the Export Import Bank of India Act September 1981. Since this inception, Exim Bank of India has been both a catalyst and a key player in the promotion of cross-border trade and investment. The main objective of Export-Import Bank is to maximize the export rather than import, because when there's a growth in export, it will also increase the employment and minimize the inflation and the different components which are directly related to the export and import. The headquarters of Exim Bank is Mumbai, and managing director of Exim Bank, David Raskunia. Now moving to the objectives, providing financial assistance to exporters and coordinating the working of institutions engaged in the financing export and import of goods and services with a view to promote the country's international trade. Now, I would like to add one more point, that Exim Bank also helping in the foreign exchange reserve and to improve the currency rate just because of the foreign transactions. So, what is the organizational structure of Exim Bank? These are the appointment by the Government of India. Managing Director, 5 directors from the Government of India, 3 directors from Scheduled Bank. Scheduled Bank means commercial bank. From the nationalized bank, private bank, foreign banks, and maybe regional rural banks. 4 directors, professionals, expert from the economics and CA legal expert, 1 director from the RBI, 1 director nominated by the IDBI, 1 director nominated by the EGGC. These are the appointment process of the board of directors of Exim Bank. These are the offices of Exim Bank in India and offshores. Now, the function of Exim Bank: overseas investment finance, project trade finance, line of credit, corporate banking. These types of support given by the Exim Bank to the different investors, businessmen, different firms which are dealing in export and import. Overseas investment means Exim Bank encourages Indian companies to invest abroad for the inter alia, setting up manufacturing units, and for acquiring overseas companies to get access to the foreign market, technology, raw materials, brand, IPR, intellectual property right, means something which is newly innovated in the business process. Project finance and trade finance, these types of also facilities given by the Exim Bank. These groups handles the entire range of export credit services such as suppliers credit, pre-shipment, agri-business group. The group handles projects and export transactions in the agriculture sector for financing. Then what do you mean by line of credit? Line of credit is the financial mechanism through which Exim Bank extends support for the export of project, equipments, goods, and services from India. Exim Bank extends LOC of its own and also at the behest and with the support of the Government of India. Corporate banking offers a number of financial programs for export-oriented units, importers, and for the company's banking overseas investment. Now, buyer's credit. Overseas buyers, importers can avail this facility for import of eligible goods and services from India on deferred payment terms. Now, this is the area where the Exim Bank is supporting at the time of any dispute or grievances in export and export. Export credit, medium long term, short term, pre and post shipment credit, import credit, import loan for the capital goods, bulk import loan for the raw materials, because without the import export there is no means of trade. Sometimes India importing the raw material from the other countries and exporting the finished good to those. Now we are moving to the third one, loan for the exporting units. Term loans for expansion, diversification, new project, export, research and development, direct equity stake in India, overseas ventures of exporting companies. These are the actual functions and area where the Exim banks are working. So now you know that there are the 3 types of banks are working. One is commercial bank, second one is development bank, Third one is the Exim Bank. Development banks and Exim banks are not dealing with the general public, but commercial bank is always open for the general public. The basic function of the commercial bank, accepting deposit and granting loans, and there are miscellaneous functions also continuing by these commercial banks. Now, what is the Exim policy of India from 2015 to 2020? Exim policy or foreign trade policy is the set of guidelines and instruction established by the DGFT. What do you mean by DGFT? DGFT is one of the department under the Exim Bank. This is called the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, and this department is directly monitored by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Exim policy replaced the earlier Import-Export Act 1992, 5-year policy governed by the DGFT, then contains general provision regarding export and import promotional measures, duty exemptions schemes, export promotion schemes, special economic zone program. Now, these terms is very important to increase the balance of payment. Special economic zone. Special economic zone is that area where the government of India is reconstructing and develop for the business, for the manufacturing point of view, and different subsidies and exemption given by the government of India for those companies who are continuing the setup for that area. And there are many areas where the special economic zone are already working. Current Exim policy 2015 and 20 main target is to double India's export, to provide quality consumer product at reasonable price. This is one of the big challenge for the Exim policy, that this is the global era. We know there's one phrase that WTO converts the globe into a village. Whatever the product and services are available in other continent, we can easily avail that facility in India just because of the globalization. Opportunities and encourages the attainment of internationally accepted standard of quality to enhance the local strength and efficiency of the Indian agriculture industry and services, thereby improving their competitiveness. Now, we are moving to the next one. Viewpoints of Exim policy, simplification of merger and reward schemes through the MEIS. MEIS means merchandise export from India scheme through the agent and merchant. Second scheme is SEIS, service export from India scheme. This is coming under the foreign trade policy. And what do you mean by BOP? Balance of payment. Balance of payment is an statement of all the transactions made between entities in one country and the rest of the world over a defined period of time. Such time may be quarterly, yearly. And the components of balance of payment is current account, capital, and financial account. Balance of trade is the part of the balance of payment. So, dear student, the difference between export and import value in given period of time is called the balance of trade. When export minus import, this is given the pictures of balance of trade. And balance of payment is one of the important pillar of foreign exchange and GDP. So now moving to the next one. Exim policy is also promoting the FDI, manufacturing sectors. It's also increasing the revenue. It's one of the important source of income of the government of India. Tariff or tax boost to making of India or make in India. Make in India means to increase more and more export rather than import. When the percentage of export increase, it will also decrease the unemployment. Less import equal to more employment. Recently changes in banking system. Now this is the fourth phase of Indian banking system. I'm not going to describe the different acts after the LPG era, liberalization, privatization, globalization. This is a part of the business environment. But in Indian banking system, the recent changes in Indian banking systems are NEFT. Through the National Electronic Fund Transfer, we can transfer the fund from one account to another account. There are some basic charges. IMPS means immediate payment services. Payment bank is there. Nowadays, different payments banks are got the license from the RBI, Reserve Bank of India, and they are working as a virtual bank. Then RTGS, real-time gross settlement. After 2 lakhs to the crores and crores, the bank can transfer from one account to other account, and banks are charging some amount in that transactions. RTGS full form is when the amount, after 2 lakhs are transferring from one bank to other bank, after the consent of that firm or the company, these types of transaction is called a real-time gross settlement. Now UPI app, mobile banking, online banking, these are the recently changes in the Indian banking system. Non-banking payment app is there, Google Pay, Amazon, Phone Pay, Bheem app, small banks, microfinance banks. Now role of artificial intelligence, AI, blockchain, cyber securities, these are the one of the challenges and one of the components which change the operation of the banking system. Now I'm moving to the next one. After the digital banking or online banking or mobile banking, there was some challenges of the government of India, that there was not the physical movement of the bank account holders in the bank branches, and they want to do the cost cutting in the banking sectors. So after the decisions of Ministry of Finance, they have given the suggestion and recommendation to the RBI, and after the request of the different banks, the merger and acquisition recently takes place. The Union Cabinet had approved the merger of the 5 associate banks along with the Bharatiya Mahila Bank with SBI. The 5 banks were state banks of Bikaner. As I told you that these were the part of the SBI since 1959, when these banks were associated with as a subsidiary bank with SBI. So these banks was totally merged and nowadays working under one logo and one name, that is State Bank of India. Effect, and from 1st April 2020, 10 nationalized banks are merged with 4 banks. The balance sheet as well as the stock of these banks will be integrated according to a scheme amalgamation approved by the Union Cabinet. Punjab National Bank, leading, acquired the Oriental Bank of Commerce, United Bank of India. Canara Bank will take over Syndicate Bank. Union Bank of India will take over Andhra Bank and Corporation Bank. Indian Bank will be merged with Allahabad Bank. These are the recently changes in the Indian banking system. Now, what are the benefits of bank mergers? The government has stated three broad gains from the merger. The first benefit is the enhanced capacity to increase the amount of credit. They have claimed that the merger will lead to a strong national presence and global reach. The third potential gain is the gain in operational efficiency that will reduce the cost of lending. Customer will get to choose from a wide array of products such as mutual funds, insurance, traditional loan, and deposit. Recapitalization need from the government will reduce. A large capital base would help the acquirer banks to offer a large loan amount. Service delivery may improve. Technological upgradation is possible. So, dear student, this one student who's asking that a question, why the RBI is called as the Central Bank of India? Now I would like to explain the answer of your question, that you know that in the beginning I have told you that in 1934 the RBI Act was drafted, and in 1935 the RBI Act was came into existence. In 1949, when the Banking Regulation Act was passed, RBI was announced the Central Bank of India, and therefore I would like to add some more thing, that RBI is called as the Bankers Bank, lending of the last resort, and apex monetary agency of India, just because of the powers, rights, and responsibilities given to the RBI from the government of India side is to minting and printing of the currency, managing the monitoring the monetary policy, smoothly running the Indian banking system with the different rates and policy passed by the RBI. Now the different types of banking rates, whether it is the SLR rate, cash reserve ratio, repo rate is there, reverse repo rate is there, all are managed by the RBI just because of its RBI Act and powers and rights given by the government of India. Now the second question asked by the one of the student, Anuj. He is asking that what the impact of demonetization on Indian banking system. So I would like to explain in short that all the paper bill is guarantee given by the government of India. This is called the tender. So on the 6th or 8th November 2016, when the government of India withdrawn the 500 and 1000 rupees tender, so this currency circulation was totally stopped by the government of India and RBI from the Indian economy, and they have given this time period to deposit these 500 and 1000 rupees. So at that time, there was the sufficient fund in the bank for the loan point of view. At the time of demonetization, the first priority of the general public to deposit their savings, whatever they have, in the form of 500 and 1000 rupees. But if I am comparing these things with the lockdown, when the lockdown will over, then there will be a huge crisis of the fund in the bank, there may be plenty of files or will be pending for the approval of loans, but the bank will not have the sufficient fund to approve the loans. This is the actual difference between demonetization and maybe after the lockdown, when the bank will open and the people may start the business, resume the business, it will happen. So there is the benefits of the demonetization, and there may be the some disadvantage of demonetization. So I think at the end of this session, I think you all are upgrade your knowledge related to Indian banking system. Thank you so much.